Conversations podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations TNI podcast. My name is Fatih Krakis, and I'm your host. I've been away for the last month or so visiting family in Turkey, so it's great to be back, although I do miss the warmer weather. Having said that, though, it is indeed wonderful to be back, and today I have a very special guest with me. A little bit about her later. Before we start, I'd like to say that we are coming to you from Wurundjeri land, and please hit like and subscribe so you can keep up to date with our latest episodes and notifications. Today I have with me Magdalena Rowan. She's been on this podcast before, but since she's been here, which was a couple of years ago now, she was appointed first to the NAATI board on the 1st of December 2023, and then she became chair on the 1st of July 2024. So I have Magdalena Rowan with me today, and we're going to talk about what it means to be on a board and what she thinks about our profession and what's coming up for NAATI as well. Magdalena is a certified interpreter, translator, an educator, a grandmother, and also an avid heli skier. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about that later as well. So welcome, and thank you so much for accepting my invitation today, Magdalena. How are you going?
Thanks, Fatih, and thanks for that lovely introduction. Yes, I have been around for quite some time, and we're just talking about how hair dye is such a good idea a little bit before that.
Hair dye. You got to have hair to dye at first, I guess, right?
Yes. So it's lovely to be back talking to you.
Lovely
thank
to
you for
have you.
inviting me.
Indeed. Yeah, no, thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you very much for coming. Look, last time we spoke about TFSA, and hello to all our friends at TFSA as well. But since things have changed for you and for our profession, we've now got you as the chair of NAATI, who we are very, very happy about, and very proud to have you there, especially with someone coming from the profession and having so much experience as a practitioner and an educator as well. And we know that your involvement with the NAATI rubrics when they were first originally being designed, and with the continuous improvement program as well. So, and here you are right at the top now. But before we talk about that, I want to get to know you a little bit better, because last time I don't think we did this. We talked more about the training at TFSA. Let's talk about Magdalena Rowan and how she came to be here. Your language is Spanish, yet I look at your name and I'm being presumptuous, you know. It doesn't sound like a Spanish name, and you don't necessarily look Spanish, I guess. What happens? How does someone with a name like that become a Spanish interpreter, translator, educator? I'm only being ignorant. I do apologize, so that I can ask the question. Tell me a story.
Well, there are a lot of Spanish-speaking people who look like me, native Spanish speakers.
I know. I'm just...
And the name is Spanish. Magdalena is Spanish. I think that's why my parents chose it, because it's fairly international. I think it's Magdalene in Greek, and Madeleine in French, and Magdalena in Italian.
Biblical names that can be found in each language, I guess.
Let's not go there. Yes. But yes, look, I guess I came from a very long way from Australia and from interpreting and translating, and I actually came from a cattle and sheep station situated in the Andes. So, it was a beautiful place where I was born in Argentina. It was just right on the Lakes District, so we had lakes and rivers and forests and mountains, of course. And I had a fabulous childhood. We had complete freedom, horses, all sorts of pets.
Did you ride as a child? Horse?
Yes, I can remember riding from earlier than I could walk, I think. So we used to, and it was interesting because I remember I used to ride on my own quite often, and I actually left the mountains when I was about 8. So I must have been riding on my own when I was under 8, which is kind of unthinkable these days. I certainly wouldn't let my children do that. And because, with the riding comes the falling off the horse and the walking home and all the rest of it.
That's
So,
how we learn, right? You got to fall so you can
exactly.
get back up again.
Exactly. You get back straight on it again.
How did your family end up in Argentina?
Well, my parents were Polish, and they were both actually in the resistance during World War II. And after near the end of World War II, they joined, like many other Polish people that were in the resistance, they joined the British Corps. So they actually ended up being demobilized in England, where they lived for a little while. And my mother actually had my brother there, so he's British. But they didn't like living there much, so they decided to migrate to Argentina. But, in a sense, languages were always in my family, because obviously I was brought up bilingual, speaking Spanish and Polish. But my mother, who was studying law just before the war broke out, she had spent considerable time in France as well, so she was a fluent French speaker, she was a fluent German speaker, and she also spoke English fluently. And my father spoke English as well. So at home, when we were, especially in winter, where we were buried in snow really for the whole of winter, we had a couple of armchairs near a fireplace, and we always had English books around. And I remember being brought up with Life magazine and National Geographic. Not that I could read any of it, because I didn't read English or speak English then. But it was always that there's always lots of languages. And then later on, we moved away to the north, and I went to school and I did French at school. And my mother was teaching English at a boys' school. So, that was the childhood that I had. And then things got a bit uncertain in Argentina, so my parents decided to migrate to Australia, which everyone kept confusing with Austria. So I remember all the information they had was this little pamphlet with a photo of a restaurant in Adelaide, which was by the weir, by the River Torrens, and they loved that picture, so they decided to come to Adelaide. That was that.
Did they get a
Snap
restaurant?
decision. No.
No.
So we landed in Melbourne. I was almost 15. In fact, I turned 15 the day we landed in Melbourne. So my parents decided to have a holiday at the same time. Well, I didn't think it was, but my parents decided to have a holiday on the way. So we flew to Panama, which was absolutely fascinating. And then we took, and that was the first time I ever saw the sea. And then we took a tourist boat through Tahiti and New Zealand. I think it was through Christchurch, actually, and landed in Melbourne. And of course, I was really annoyed because I was, a teenager. I had all my friends sorted out. I had all my life sorted out beautifully. And I missed out on my 15th birthday, which is a big thing in Argentina. It's like your 21st here. So, and I didn't want to learn English or be here or any of that. So I wasn't a happy family.
Or do you have any siblings?
Yes, I have an older brother who was 5 years older than me. So, and he had actually studied English at school, so his English was a bit better than mine. And we had English lessons on the ship, which they sort of had to drag me to, and I was most uninterested in it because, of course, I was just going to turn around and go back home. I wasn't going to stay in this country. But
we're glad that
must.
We're glad that you did, Magdalena.
Thank you.
We're glad that you didn't rebel and take the next cruise ship out of here.
Yeah. So afterwards, we caught the train from Melbourne to Adelaide, and we ended up in living for a while in a Nissan hut in one of the migrant settlement places, which was actually really good because although the accommodation was kind of fairly basic, it was fantastic because we got, food and accommodation at a really low cost and orientation to, get settled and find your feet and so on. And I went to school in Glenelg for a little while for the rest of the year.
Oh, that's nice.
And I communicated with...
Isn't it?
Yes, it is.
What do you think about coming from the Andes, the mountains, and now living by the seaside?
Yeah, well, it was all a bit bizarre. It was, well, no, we had lived in the north for a while. So we lived in flat country and hot, actually subtropical country for quite a while. So that wasn't a big shock. But yes, at school I communicated with my teacher. I had the home teacher there was the French teacher. So I communicated with her in French, and her French wasn't very good and mine wasn't very good either. So that didn't work out very well. But then during the holidays, my parents organized some private tuition for me. And I remember it was Miss McNamara, who she was about 80, or I thought she was at that stage. And she smelled of talcum powder. So, I can't remember what I learned. Yeah, she was probably 35 or something. So after that, I enrolled in a state high school, and the majority of students there were actually from English migrants, and there was no one there for whom English was a second language. I was the only one, so I guess it was no ESL classes, no special.
So your mother spoke English, but you didn't.
That's right.
It's usually the other way around with migrants when they come here, right?
That's right. It is. Yeah. So it was a bit weird. So at that stage it was either sink or swim, and I sort of decided that swimming was the best option.
Well,
so it sort of took me about a year to get going, but yeah. And after I finished school, I actually did interior design as my career. So I used to quite enjoy that. And after I finished that, I worked in architectural practices. And, it was interesting because in those days, we're talking about these early 70s, you interviewed your employer basically because there were so many jobs available, and you could, if your marks were good, you could take a pick, which is quite a different scenario from today, of course.
So you worked as an interior designer?
I did for a few years.
At a commercial level or residential level? What was it?
Residential. Yeah, a bit of commercial, but mainly residential. So yes, nothing to do with languages.
Are there properties still around?
One specky one that I worked on has just been demolished, and I won't mention it here, but it had some fairly notorious people living in it.
Wow.
Or the people that we did the work for became fairly notorious at a later stage, not for the right reasons. So I won't mention it. But yes, there's a couple of them that are still around. So I'm sure they've changed all the design since then and whatever. But there you are.
Magdalena, I had no idea about this side of you. I'm so glad I asked the question.
This is my creative side. But after I worked for a couple of years, we decided to do the then Australian thing and go. I was married then, and we went to England for about 4 or 5 years to work and travel, basically. So, we traveled around Europe and South America, and I had all sorts of temp jobs, including one working in a very traditional English office that was run by Lord Samuel, very posh. And I went to work there as a bookkeeper, and I really didn't know much about bookkeeping, which they sussed out within the first 10 minutes. But I got sort of taken care of by a very nice person there who taught me all there was to know about bookkeeping. So that was good. And then for a couple of years, I was running an Art Nouveau art gallery. So that was really interesting work. So,
many lives of Magdalena Rowan. I love it.
So lots of different.
Did you ever end up back at the village in Andes?
Yes, we traveled while we were there. We spent about 6 months traveling around South America, right up from the Caribbean through every country down to Argentina. So I revisited, and I've been back obviously quite a few times before. That's where my heart is, in the Andes and mountains.
I know how that feels. But how long was it from that 15-year-old angry, mad Magdalena to going back to the Andes? How long did that take?
I was there I guess I would have been about 22, 23 when I went back.
7, 8 years. Did you catch up?
Well, it was interesting. It was interesting because I still considered myself completely South American and completely Argentinian. And I was really because I had really not much to do with the language or whatever, even in between those times. And when I went back, I realized how anglicized I had become. It was quite a shock. It took me just a few days to kind of get adjusted to the whole thing again. And so that was quite interesting.
Did you catch up with old friends?
I certainly did, yes. And it's interesting again, and since then when I've caught up with them, because the friends that you have when you're young, those children that you're brought up with, you never lose that connection, I have some very good beautiful friends here that I've had for a long time, but we haven't shared a childhood. And that makes a lot of difference in friendships. And I'm guessing you feel the same when you go back to Turkey.
Yeah. I've got friends there from I just met very recently my friend from primary school, so whom I known since I was 6, 7. And every time we catch up, it's like nothing. It's like 40 years haven't passed. And then I've got really, really close high school friends there. And you're right. I guess those, I don't know why, but I think those are stronger because we were so vulnerable and we gave 100% back then. You just gave it all. You dropped everything there, without thinking of anything else, without having any kind of expectancy from anyone. You just gave it your all, and that's why I think that relationship just sticks.
That's right, it does. And you might not have anything else in common because you've lived completely different lives, but there is that connection. And I'm actually going there in a few weeks again. So,
and you're still in touch with those friends, some of them?
Yeah. Yes, I am. Yeah, and I've got family there, of course, as well. So
hello to your friends from Argentina. Then maybe they'll watch this, and you can interpret what we've said if they don't speak English. I'm trying to do a segue. So, with all these different lives that you've led, how then you started going into language and then translating, interpreting. I didn't know that there was this all other side. I thought you would have gone straight into the whole translating, interpreting thing because you've done so much in the field and you've given so much to the profession. When was that the turnover?
Well, really, when we came back from England, we started a family, and I was at a bit of a loss. I was working at a couple of jobs, but I really didn't want to go back to interior designer. I realized, sometime back then that I really wasn't a very good designer. So I didn't want to be, where I was mediocre. I was kind of the technical side, but not so much in the creative side. So, and then one day,
an art gallery as well. I'm sure,
but there's a difference. Yeah, there's a difference. And a good friend of mine one day, Sandy Salby, she saw an advertisement from Multicultural SA to say that they needed interpreters. And so she showed me the advertisement. And that was it, really. That was in 1979. So my oldest son was 6 months, or my only son then, 6 months old.
Yep, I think
so.
I'm the same age as your son then, I think.
Probably. That's sad, isn't it?
No, I'm not that young. No.
So I enrolled to do a certificate course in TAFE, which was then the course for becoming an interpreter. And actually, Jill Blewett was one of my lecturers. So I knew her then. She was absolutely fantastic to work with, to listen to. Certainly was, yes. And then I was pregnant with my second child, and I did the Polish interpreters course as well. So I had to catch up quite a bit with my Polish language because I had what I now call kitchen Polish. So that was interesting. And that was with Anna Radford, who was an absolutely wonderful, teacher. And the rest, as they say, is history. So I sat for my then what was called level 2 and level 3 accreditation in both Spanish and Polish. And then I sat for translation, but I didn't manage to get translation into Spanish. So I went back to university and did a Bachelor of Arts majoring in Spanish.
Into Spanish? So your English ended up being stronger than your Spanish?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, I spent most of my high school here, so yes. And so then I managed to get translation in both directions. Having said that, I failed a few tests in between there. So there's nothing wrong with failing an NAATI test, as you know.
I've done that myself a few times too. So, but it's like falling off that horse, isn't it?
Exactly. You just get back up and go again.
Exactly. So all the candidates out there, there's nothing wrong with failing the NAATI test a few times.
No, that's right.
Get back on that horse.
So that was, I'd finished that. And then I did some teaching at uni at Flinders University. I taught translation to both honours students and third year students. And I was also I started to teach interpreting at TAFE. I think that was the early 90s. And so I was mothering as well as teaching, as well as still doing interpreting and translating.
How was work back then in South Australia?
Very busy and good, yes.
So
good,
Spanish,
good conditions.
and Polish back then?
And Polish, yes. So it was much better pay than what we get today, relatively speaking. There was quite good conditions. And because I had the two languages and we'd had a big migration from both countries, from both Poland and South Americans there.
Here have been and are, so very lucky indeed.
So yes, so I was sort of really, really busy. So, and then I basically moved more towards TAFE because I couldn't keep juggle all those balls in the air. And so I went and did a postgraduate degree in education as well for adults. And that sort of started my career, I guess, as an educator.
Yeah, I remember a few years ago now, you and I worked together on the skill set project as well. And you were still at TAFE back then, so I had the pleasure of actually working with you and learning from you. Wonderful city, to be honest with you. I hadn't been to Adelaide until then. And so thank you very much for hosting. And I look forward to going back there soon, actually, for a little bit of pleasure, not just for work this time. You worked as a practitioner in Polish and in Spanish languages. And you were also a teacher as well for many years, an educator. How has that combination influenced your approach to our profession?
Look, I think that wearing several hats always broadens your perspective, and as you know, because I know that you teach and practice as well, teaching improves your practice because it makes you reflect on what you do and how you do it.
Absolutely.
And why you do it and so on. But I was also then involved with NAATI in one way or the other, different reviews and different things since about the 90s. And at that time also I was very active in AUSIT. I was the chairperson of the South Australian branch for quite a few years. So that allowed me to see the profession from several points of view, and I've always tried to maintain those points of contact, I suppose, because it does allow you to see the perspective. So I was very fortunate in that sense because it did enable me to grow and apply my industry knowledge to teaching and my practice, and then vice versa as well. So, and of course, I'm far from unique in that sense because, as you know, we have many colleagues who wear several hats, if you like, as well. But as a result of that, also, I've had many wonderful mentors that I could learn from and see what they were doing. And we used to, as educators, for example, we used to have a group called CITIA that for, teaching and interpreting and translating. And we used to meet once a year. And, that was really...
what a great idea. Can we do that again?
I think we should. I really think we should. Because that was the vet sector and the higher education sector. And we're very small, really, as far as an industry goes. So it kept us all in touch, which was very helpful, I think.
Well, maybe, we'll get to your responsibilities as NAATI chair soon, but maybe that's something you can, again, reinstigate because it sounds like a fantastic idea. We very recently, with AUSIT, had a little workshop with educators around the country. And it was lovely but short. So hopefully more and more, because I think everyone has different approaches, different experiences, and it would be amazing just to learn off each other as well.
And, we also can take that because you and I have both worked in the NAATI workshops with the new certification system. And again, we had people coming in. They're not just educators, but also practitioners and people from other fields. And I found that working in that work group as well as in the continuous improvement program was really a highlight in my career. It was to be able to work with colleagues and exchange ideas and see things from a different point of view. And also at the end, bring about really meaningful change, because I think we've produced a world standard certification system. And that was thanks to many talented people.
Absolutely.
As much NAATI staff as well as educators and practitioners. So it was an incredibly enriching experience.
It was indeed, and I loved how granular it was as well. And it was, I loved NAATI's approach of we'll stay at this until it's perfect. It was never, we've got this amount of workshops, whatever we get done, we get done. It was like, no, if it's not perfect, we'll get together again. So I did really like that approach of that granular approach. And like you said as well, there were people from all different kinds of backgrounds and languages, and even within NAATI as well, from interpreters, translators to linguists, to people from other backgrounds. It was indeed a lovely, lovely opportunity to get together. Let's talk about, if you don't mind, the NAATI board. First of all, maybe not all our listeners would be familiar with how a board works. Let's just talk about NAATI in this particular case. How does the NAATI board operate? Maybe you could tell us a little bit about also its structure within regards to states, territories, and federal government and so on as well.
Yeah. Well, like any board, the NAATI board is responsible for overseeing management and governance of NAATI. That's the crucial role of a board, to make sure that the company is financially sound, not just now, but for the future. So to see, to make sure of risk management, and also to see to it that there's a definite strategic direction for the company. A board is also responsible for, the monitoring and the implementation of that strategic plan to sort of keep a check on all the key performance indicators. And as well as that, of course, the board has to monitor the CEO's performance. So now the NAATI board, in addition to that, has to report on the board's stewardship of NAATI to the members. Now, NAATI is a not-for-profit company, and it is actually jointly owned by the Commonwealth, the states, and the territory governments. Mm-hmm. And what we call the members are the Commonwealth, states, and territory ministers, who are responsible for either multicultural affairs or the interpreting and translating services. So they're the ones that kind of own NAATI and to whom the board is responsible to. The NAATI board itself is chosen by the ministers or the members. Now, every minister has a representative also that NAATI deals directly, or the board deals directly with. And at the end, each board member is actually approved and appointed by the Commonwealth minister at the time. So there is an application process and there is an interview process. And the members also appoint the chair of the board, again, with final approval from the Commonwealth Minister.
Okay.
So that's the function of the board, basically. Now, NAATI has a relatively new board at the moment. So the oldest member there, not in age, but in engagement, has started in July. So all the members there are less than have been there for just over a year. So I find that
almost a brand new board then, right?
Yeah. Yes, there was a big changeover. Yeah. So, and when I joined in December last year, there was another person that joined with me, and there were two members that had already joined. So, and since I joined, there were another further two members that have joined as well. So the board has got 6 board members, including the chair. So it's fairly small, and it's quite manageable.
Everything's on the NAATI website. Can people go in and see who's on the board and this whole structure that we speak about?
Definitely, everything's on the website, and there's a bio for each of the board members and a nice picture, so you can see who it is and what the structure is.
Beautiful new photo, which will be on the promotional material. Lovely, lovely headshot. I guess it's always great excuse to get a good headshot as well, huh?
That's right. Lots of Photoshop, I'm sure.
Oh, no, not at all. Not for you. So tell me, you became a member in December 2023, and then you became the chair on the 1st of July 2024. How did you feel when you became the chair? I mean, what a great achievement. How did Magdalena feel?
It was daunting. It was exciting, and I knew I was up for a big learning curve. So, I mean, before I joined the board, I did a foundation course at the Australian Institute for Company Directors. So I was a bit prepped up about, what it was all about and so on. And the previous chair, Vula Missameri, was actually a fabulous leader and a really good mentor. So, so that was very, very helpful. And although we have a new board, it's actually a really fantastic board. It's incredibly talented, and there's a really broad range of skills, which is very useful because it provides various lenses on each issue and perspectives. So it leads to really constructive discussions. I think it's absolutely fabulous, and it's really fascinating.
And you're enjoying the role so far, obviously. Was there anything that surprised you about being chair?
Well, yes, one of the things is that, if I ask something to be done, it actually gets done really quickly.
Is that not the case at home, Magdalena?
So, yes. No, it's early days still. So ask me in another 3 years and I'll be able to give you much more information. By the way, the board is appointed for 3 years, and so is the chair. So, yeah.
And then does there then have to be a changeover, or could there be a second term or anything? How does that work?
I think there is a possibility of one extension, but there has to be some reasons for it. So, yes, there is a possibility for, and previous board members have had extensions, but it's not necessarily the case.
And how often do you get together? What's the workload?
We get together 4 times a year. So, we meet in various cities, and usually face to face. Sometimes some people come in online if they're not able to come in person. But I meet with the CEO at least once a month, or more frequently if that's needed, and we discuss whatever's happening, because at each meeting the board has to be updated about everything that is happening, so that they can have a finger on the pulse of NAATI, of course, and of the industry as well.
So you get updated monthly, pretty much, right?
Pretty much, yes. And often it's more often generally, because there'll be something that happens, and so we have a little discussion about that and so on. So and obviously because I'm still involved in the industry, and I'm still a practicing interpreter and translator, and I'm still involved in education in one form or another, so I can hear when things happen and so on. So we have a catch up about that. Yes.
We keep saying CEO, so we'll just say hi to Mike Painting from here as well, instead of just calling you the CEO. And I guess it's also, you've had a working relationship with Mike Painting already before that, and NAATI in general. Would that would have made things a little bit more easier? Are you able to, or is he able to, or both of you able to talk to each other very honestly about issues? And do you think that, this new relationship that you have with NAATI, are you going to be able to get things? Are there things in your mind that you want to see big change happening soon? And what do you think about that?
Yes, look, it is really useful that I have known Mark Painting for the last 9 years since he's been at NAATI, and I was always impressed with his style of management and the openness and the transparency that he's introduced in NAATI. And we'll talk a little bit later about NAATI today as compared to NAATI years ago. But it is a very good relationship because we can talk really openly. And I guess the relationship changes when you are on the board, and certainly when you are the chair of the board. But nonetheless, there's really, even if there was an issue, there were no trepidations about me discussing them with Mark quite openly. So it is there's trust on both sides, I guess. So it is very positive in that sense.
Yeah, well, we were over the moon when we heard that you were appointed as the chair. So I'm sure that you and the NAATI board and NAATI management, you'll be doing wonders for our profession, and I firmly believe in that. And I look forward to the many years. Hopefully, both Mark and you are at the helm, leading our profession forward. So apart from receiving monthly reports and then catching up every 3 months, what other responsibilities do you have as chair?
Well, I guess the provide leadership is my main responsibility to the board and to the management. And, I'm the primary contact between the board and the management as well. So I do have control of procedural meetings. And in this sense, I've been very lucky in that the company secretary, Georgina Faro, is an absolute gem. What she doesn't know about governance doesn't matter. So she's been quite a good guide for me and a big help. I also need to make sure that I facilitate discussions and, ensure that core issues are addressed. We always have an in-camera meeting before the main board meeting, so where we can discuss issues within the board without management being present. So, I need to be a good listener for that, and I need to make sure that those issues get addressed in the most appropriate way, and facilitate the most effective contribution from board members. I'm also the spokesperson for the board, and in that sense, I represent the board to the members of government. I can provide counsel.
Do you do that alone
to board
with
members.
The board?
No, I'm the spokesperson. Well, depending on the occasion, but
I was going to say,
do
you
that
might
alone
have all
or
these
with
members and ministers around you, and just one Magdalena Rowan, and everyone's going, "Okay, tell us what's been going on." Is that
Usually Mark is with me. So
good?
we did actually. We had a meeting. My first board engagement as chair was to meet with all the Commonwealth and States multicultural and territories multicultural ministers in Adelaide when they were discussing the multicultural review and the issues in the industry. So that was my baptism, if you like.
Well, they were the lucky ones to meet you. Trust me. Fantastic. So when it comes to decision making, and I know that we've touched on this a little bit before, do you get hands-on, or is it more of a team effort? How do you work in that regard?
Well, the board is really a collective. It's and every decision made by the board is made by the board as a whole, but every individual in the board is responsible for the decisions that are made. So it's, there may be disagreements within the board about certain things, and things might be put to a vote. But while I lead the board, it's not really my place to force my point of view or to lead my own agenda. And although I have a say as a director, it's just one more opinion in the board itself.
I get a double vote or anything.
Well, I do actually. If there is a disagreement and the vote is tied, I get an additional vote, an additional casting vote. That's what it's my director's vote. But, it's not about trying to lead to what I think should be done. It's really as a collective. And that's where a board like this one is very diverse, and everybody has really particular skills. I mean, obviously my skill is my knowledge and history with the industry, but there are other people on the board who've got a really broad range of skills, so they can bring in a view. If you know the industry really well, you tend to be a little bit one-sided and might be blind to other things. So having a board that brings perspective, it's excellent in that way. Yeah.
No, it's fantastic. I think there's a really good balance now. So I'm looking very much forward to you and your team as the board and as NAATI management and all the staff to see what's in store for us in the future. Since the introduction of the new certification system in 2018, we've seen a lot of changes with NAATI, especially, I guess, you being involved with it from, we were saying, 90s, right? So you've seen how it was and what it turned into and what it is now. How do you assess these changes from your perspective as a practitioner, an educator, and now a NAATI board member and chair?
Look, in my 40-odd years, actually it's nearly 45 years, I think.
You've got to update your CV soon.
In this profession, I never expected to see such changes, to be honest. Not for the lack of trying, but I never expected to still be in this industry and see the changes that we have seen in the last, 7-8 years. The NAATI of today bears absolutely no resemblance almost to the NAATI of about 10 years ago.
And the speed that the changes were.
And the speed.
Right? It's not just the changes that happened, but how quickly it happened.
Exactly. And that's in fact, that's completely due to Mark Painting's work with this organization. He completely transformed NAATI in governance, in technology, accountability, transparency, human resources, human capital, quality, in every single way. So his leadership has been absolutely crucial in all these changes that we've had.
I agree.
The other thing that he has done, or he did and still does, is he listens to industry experts. And you mentioned earlier when you said about the workshops that, it had to be done right. Didn't matter how long it took. And he has this approach as well. So he has consultations, but he actually listens to advice, and the consultations are constructive and they result in action very often. So even if it's difficult, even if it's something that's expensive to implement, if it's for the better of the organization and the industry, they do come in. So it's been a whole cultural change with NAATI in those last years, and the quality of the organization. I mean, for example, NAATI now has an 89 to 90% Microsoft Secure score in cybersecurity. Now, that's just one example, and it might not mean much to people, but it's actually unheard of in an organization that size, and much larger organizations, of course. They have a performance management system for examiners, which they're just introducing now. They have a partnership with Televic, which allows them to provide testing platforms for all their tests, but also now to have that as a business as an extra business diversity. So they've just signed a contract with Victoria Police to carry out their secure online testing. As we know, live testing of interpreters. I mean, you will remember how many years we were asking for that instead of having a meaningless recorded test. This test actually tests the skills that need to be tested. NAATI has a really open collaboration with AUSIT, with the union, with the Commonwealth, and it's continuously trying to, address the challenges in the industry to the extent that it can. But it's recognized internationally for that as well. So it is a leader in certification in interpreting and translating. We've got new specialist credentials, NAATI regularly sponsors events like conferences and so on.
By the way, AUSIT National Conference 2024 in Melbourne. If you haven't already booked and registered, do so now. Sorry, just had to put that in there. Please keep going, mate.
Yes, be there. We'll see you there. So, there's things that were insurmountable problems before, like doing the translations in other means than handwritten, and also have access to resources online while you're doing the translation tests. We forget about this, but,
We were talking about failing the test before, and the first time I failed it, I actually couldn't finish my translation on time because I was handwriting it out, and you weren't allowed to use a whiteout. You had to cross over and rewrite. And I remember running out of time and running out of space to write, and we were taking the test at the Melbourne Showgrounds, and it was just such a stressful atmosphere. There was hundreds of people around me, dictionaries everywhere, running out of space, running out of headspace. Oh, and now, we teach it as well, and the platform is there, and it's available for practice on the NAATI website too. And it's just, oh my God, it's just so easy. And you're still getting the same amount of time to translate.
That's right, exactly. So, yeah. So, these changes, they come in, and it's, the same as the electronic stamp for translators. We now have a QR, really secure stamp that we can put on translation. So, the NAATI certification system has been adopted in New Zealand now for interpreters. So, there's been huge, huge changes.
I was going to talk about that too, but you've introduced us now, so thank you very much. A huge congratulations on that. NAATI has been selected as the certification authority for interpreters in New Zealand. Can you tell us a little bit about that? How did that come to happen?
Well, the New Zealand government, the Ministry of Business and Innovation, approached NAATI, and of course, as you know, these things go on for quite a few years before any decisions are made. But they decided that to phase the NAATI certification in because they had a few arrangements for determining the quality of interpreters, but nothing like a testing or a rigorous system. So they decided to phase the NAATI system in 2021. And the New Zealand government has been really good in how they have approached this, because they actually, from 2021, they offered free training for interpreters and free to pay the cost for the NAATI tests as well, until the implementation stage, which is in July 24. So as of July 24, all New Zealand government service interpreters have to have a credential. So as a consequence, NAATI now has a new services agreement with the New Zealand government. And as of June 2024, there were 386 credentialed interpreters in New Zealand, in almost held by about 300 practitioners. And
numbers are only
and it's growing
to grow anyway, right?
Yeah. But that initiative by the government to actually help people get that for the first 3 years was quite successful. Yeah.
And we know that, of course, for conference interpreting generally around the world, that there is certification testing, but on a community interpreting level, pretty much at the level that we're doing it, Australia is pretty much the only one. NAATI's testing regime is the only one, right?
It is. There is some testing in the
I mean,
state.
languages as well, I should say.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
sorry, I was going to say there is testing, like there is medical interpreter testing and legal interpreter testing in the United States, but not in so many languages, I guess.
Yeah, and certainly in community interpreter, in Australia, we definitely are the leaders. And you can see that when you go to conferences. We had the FIT conference here a few years ago, the Federation of International Interpreters and Translators, and when we had a few presentations and we were discussing some issues with other people, and people from overseas were saying, yes, but you have NAATI, and other countries are looking towards Australia in that sense to see how it's done, I guess.
So how's it going so far within regards to the New Zealand government and service providers? What's the feedback so far?
It's good, like with all changes, there was some resistance from the industry, from interpreters and translators at first. And with any change comes fear of the unknown and what is it going to mean. But because the government has been so proactive, and I'm also a member of the New Zealand Society for Interpreters and Translators, so I go to their conferences every year, and I've seen the positivity and the embracing of the NAATI system every year. It's been better. There's also the advantage, there was the fear that suddenly New Zealand was going to be flooded with Australian interpreters working remotely there, and vice versa. The Australian interpreters had this fear that the New Zealanders were going to, invade the industry here. But of course, neither of that has happened, although it does provide the opportunity for both countries to work in the other country. So I think it's good for both countries, but also I think we can cooperate. I just went to the latest New Zealand conference in September, and that was, foremost in my mind of how much we can cooperate, because there's some things that they do really, really well, which we could learn from, and vice versa. There's some things that we might have more experience at, and so on, that we could share with New Zealand as well.
No,
yeah. I mean, I've worked with many practitioners in New Zealand as well, because I did quite a bit of training as part of this government initiative.
How is it being received there by the interpreters, the practitioners?
Well, that's what I mean. So I've known quite a few of these practitioners, and at the beginning it was, but I think they've seen the value of actually having their skills acknowledged by a concrete certification. So it's quite positive. That isn't to say that it's, globally positive and everybody loves it, but I think it's been received quite positively on the whole.
I mean, it's also about quality assurance as well, though. I mean, right? We've heard things like some practitioners interpreting in 3, 4, 5, 6 languages, yet they might not be 100% competent on all of those languages. So it does bring now that level of quality assurance, that level of standard, which is what we're trying to achieve here anyway, right?
Exactly, that's right. So it's that quality assurance, and that the fact that they've undergone a process, they've done the training, they've done the testing, so they are at a certain standard. Yes.
Very good, very good. I'm going to ask you a question now that's maybe a little off center. As a not-for-profit, as a company that is working for the profession industry, you've mentioned Victoria Police, you've mentioned now New Zealand. What are your thoughts on NAATI exploring these avenues for other business?
Well, NAATI is definitely looking at that. As you know, NAATI is accountable, to the members, certainly financially. And up until now, since 2018, as you said, there were many changes. It was very fast. Everybody was really overworked, and there were changes all the time. So everything was a bit upside down while they were trying to embed this new system. So things like looking overseas and so on were on hold until NAATI could get this right here. But now is certainly the time that that's settled a little bit. And so NAATI, I imagine that the board will be very interested in looking at some overseas opportunities or some further opportunities for business diversification. Saudi Arabia, for example, has shown some interest in the NAATI system, as has Malaysia. So, it's certainly something that I'm sure that the board will be keen to look at these opportunities at international level. And also NAATI is networking internationally. They are in touch with the international organizations where there could be other opportunities.
And do you think that NAATI has the systems and the manpower readily available to offer these external services without dropping the ball for us here?
Well, that's what the board has to ensure that all the KPIs are met.
Almost.
So obviously, yes. Obviously, the most important, their core business is interpreting and translating in Australia. So that's the core business. But in order to make that happen successfully, you also need some funds and to be secure and to be financially diverse, I guess. So that's where the opportunities come in that diversification, which allows NAATI then to do what they do with interpreters. Because you might know, other people might not know, but the interpreting tests as such, certainly the CPI interpreting test, which is the most popular, it's not cheap to run, and NAATI doesn't make a profit on that. So,
you make a bit.
Because you have 2 examiners involved in every test, you have role players, etc., etc., etc. So in order to keep the cost low for candidates, NAATI has to fund it somehow. So this business diversification allows NAATI to do that.
I understand that, and I don't think that NAATI would be going down this road had it not been ready anyway. And we were talking about technology and systems in general. I think now that they're all set, you would have the luxury to go out and chase more business outside of the TNI space.
Exactly, yes. And there are opportunities out there, but you also have to be very careful, as you say, not to dilute what you do here and whether it's compatible, and you have to be careful. And I'm sure that that NAATI will be with the oversight of the board.
Very good. Well, that's the challenge that's waiting for you then. Now, there's been a talk about the sustainability of the profession. We've been talking about it now for maybe a year or two. We heard about the Deloitte report, which then led to the Multicultural Framework Review. What are your thoughts on the Multicultural Framework Review? What stands out most to you from it?
Yes, look, I was really impressed by the level of consultations that report that the reviewers did. There were over 200 public consultations in Australia. There were over 700, nearly 800 public submissions, 15% of which were in languages other than English. And as you mentioned, the Deloitte report of 23 mentioned that there was an erosion of about 300 to 800 million from inappropriate language services per year. So, it is a very important work. And Dr. Hastelal was the chair of the review, and I heard him speak at a community meeting in Melbourne, and he emphasized that his uppermost in his mind was that the report had to be fit for purpose and fit for the future. And he also said it was also important to establish measures of success and accountability. So I think that's really important, and that you can see that in the report. And of course, it is very encouraging that, the report is huge and it covers an awful lot of areas. We're mainly interested in language services, but it does cover an awful lot of areas. But I think it is encouraging that out of the recommendations, 4 of the priority recommendations had to do with the TNI sector, So that they were that to leverage Australia's diversity of languages, the sustainability and quality of language services, to fully fund TIS national capacity and obviously to boost NAATI funding as well. So, it's really important that they were upmost as priority recommendations. Of course, within that, there's also, and it is also mentioned in the report, the importance of government procurement of interpreting and translating services. And that's something that when Mark and I spoke with the ministers at the forum, we brought up as well that, it's a crucial factor because things are not going to improve until several factors come together. But one of them is that procurement, which is crucial in improving the working conditions for interpreters and translators. And, at the moment, the procurement of of language services for government does not match necessarily the language policies that the different states have.
Yeah, and often these are all different depending on state, territory, federal. Is there any work being done on bringing all that together?
Well, exactly. One
policy to rule them all?
One recommendation, one of the recommendations, and it is that does feature in the report as well, to have one national language policy and one body that, manages it all. Because at the moment, what is happening is different states, different departments, put out tenders, and basically often it is a race to the bottom. So
unfortunately,
and the people that suffer at the end are not just the interpreters, but the people that they provide services for, because it does deteriorate, the quality of who you can get. So I think the report was really positive in that sense. I mean, it was unfortunate in the sense that Minister Giles moved to another department right at the time when that report and the government response was issued. But I hear that Minister Burke has taken the review on board, and in particular,
I didn't know about.
No, that's right. I think in particular, Assistant Minister Julian Hill is very engaged. I've heard that he has already spoken to, and he's our speaker in the AUSIT conference in Melbourne.
Indeed.
So, he is familiarizing himself with the issues. It is a big sector. It's a small sector, but it's a big, broad sector with many, many interrelated issues. As well as that, Ali Mon, the Assistant Secretary to Migrant and English Language Services, is delivering the Jill Blewett lecture. So as you can see, there is a lot of engagement from government. And I know that Ali has been working very hard as well on the review, as has your previous guest, Lee Cox. So, that's right.
It's a national forum as well now where, we all get together frequently to talk about these issues.
Exactly. So, there's a panel at the AUSIT conference also that is going to discuss the Multicultural Framework Review. So there's a lot of push from all sides to move this work forward. And I know that the Commonwealth has already earmarked some funds for the recommendations in this report. So, at the moment, it's watch this space. But, I'm a realist, but what did we agree on? 45 years? 45 roughly years that I've had in this industry. To be honest, I've never felt more positive. I think that we've now got the best climate we've ever had if we are going to be seeing some change.
I think now is the time we also desperately need the change, though. So it's welcome. It's welcome. It's welcome now. It's welcome as quick as possible, because we're looking at recertification numbers. We can see that there is quite a noticeable downward trend in recertification. That shows us that people are leaving the profession. And I think most of the practitioners that I've met, they love interpreting, translating. It's a passion thing. To be able to work with your language, work with your communities. And I don't think they're the happiest when they leave, but they have to leave at the end of the day. Especially with some of the new and emerging languages where there might be less work or lower paying work. I understand people need to take care of their families, because you end up getting paid more being an Uber driver than being an interpreter, unfortunately, these days. So it is concerning for the profession and our communities. So, like I said, it's welcome now. It's welcome ASAP. And I think this is the right time to be talking about it. And you're right, I've never seen so much talk and movement at government levels as well. And having met Ali and having interviewed Lee as well, I think I believe in them. They sound very genuine, and they don't look like they want to be going anywhere anytime soon. So hopefully we start putting a bit of a positive trend in this. Let's see if we can keep our interpreters interpreting, get more into the profession, because we're definitely going to be needing them more and more into the future.
Yes, indeed. And look, and you mentioned recertification, and I mean there's several causes for that also. Obviously nothing happens just because of one reason, but this race to the bottom in procurement services has a lot to do with that, as well as the language service providers and the lack of accountability that there's there for not using credentialed interpreters. Not all of them, but certainly there's a number of them, because there's no accountability.
Do we know though, because no one knows anything. There is no governing body or policing body or auditing body. Okay, everyone's saying LSPs are working with non-certified interpreters, translators, and everything just seems to me a little anecdotal. And we hear from practitioners, obviously. I'm playing the devil's advocate here because I'm then going to ask the question: are we going to one day see potentially a body that would go into an LSP and say, give me an audit of all your jobs, who have you sent out to what? Like, at the moment, it's just their word against your word.
I mean, that's a difficult question, isn't it? Really? And I know where you're asking it. But there has to be something that's in the contract that actually does, talk about maybe, I don't know about penalties or whatever, but it does talk about what it is that's being offered to the interpreters and who it is that they're actually going to employ. And there has to be something as an incentive for LSPs to ensure that, and really in today's climate, there's no excuse, and I know this sounds a bit airy-fairy, but there's no excuse for working with a non-credentialed interpreter, because if you are from or at least someone who's had the training and is trying to get, a credential, if you're working with the languages that are being tested, then people can sit for the test. And if they don't get the test, at least if they're being encouraged to sit for it again and so on. If you're working in a language that's not being tested, there's recognition, for which you have to do some training, and then you have to have a certain level of English, and you can get your recognition. So there's no excuse for having someone with nothing.
I look very rare.
We know that there still are people there working.
Languages, let's say very rare languages. You might be at very rare times, but especially with established languages, we do still hear non-certified or lower certified people going to jobs. And, it does state in contracts, it does state in language policies. But yeah, I just, it would be good to see the playing field leveled out for the practitioners, so no matter who you work for, you're going to get treated the same level, with respect, with good working conditions, getting good rates. And, you shouldn't necessarily be like an Uber driver or a share car driver going, oh, I'll work for these guys. They're a little bit better here. They're a little bit better. It's already hard enough to interpret and translate,
exactly.
Let alone trying to figure out who you're going to do court work for. They pay a little bit more than they do. They pay more for hospitals in this state. They pay less more for hospitals in that state. It's just such hard work. And
a lot of that is to do that there's no award for interpreters. So some states, some state government services have pinned their sort of own award, but there's no national award. So NAATI is actually participating in discussions at the moment that are ongoing about. There still is, but
still going?
Well, it was rejected at the time by the Fair Work Australia because there were some holes in there and it wasn't what was offered wasn't good enough. So so there's still work being done there. I mean, it's a fairly complex issue, but NAATI's definitely participating in there and trying to make sure that and the union is as well, to make sure that we get an award, because that's a basis to start from, and that's got to do, as we said before, with that recertification level that, there's and it also has to do with the demand, the supply of interpreters, because obviously if people are leaving the industry and they're not recertifying, or they're leaving, because they're leaving the industry, then you can't supply, especially the languages from new and emerging communities. You move that together with the low pay rates, as you've said, so they're all issues that are intermingled. But there's also the case where people are not recertifying because they don't have to, because it's not demanded of them. So, their employment goes on regardless. Well, I think there's some LSPs there who are still employing interpreters even if they haven't recertified. So, you need to have that check.
There's nothing that needs to be checked then.
So, yes, lots of people. And from NAATI, of course, NAATI can't regulate the industry. They can't set the rates. They can't do any of that. But they can help.
NAATI should just do everything.
But they can help. I know at the moment NAATI is reviewing the professional development catalogue to make it a bit easier and less daunting. I mean, it isn't hard, but some of the things people are finding a bit tricky, and that could be a turn-off. And it's also looking at the conditions for recertification. So, for example, work practice requirements for languages of low diffusion. So, they're looking at a few things that should make it a little bit easier from NAATI's point of view. But, of course, we also need that push from the procurement side and the LSP quality side, yeah.
Government people, LSPs, if you're all listening, yes, let's all work together to make these changes, hopefully. Look, I said that this would go for 45 minutes to 60 minutes. I don't know. It's been a bit longer than that, I reckon. You and I can keep talking forever. That's mainly my fault. I'm not saying you talk too much. I'm saying I talk too much and I make you talk too much.
Oh, I don't know. I think you and I together can go on forever.
But let's try to wrap things up because I'm sure I'll talk to you again in the future just to touch base and get an update on how things are going.
Just one thing I wanted to mention. We were mentioning about diversification, and NAATI has actually got a product which is the Community Language Aid product. And it's Community Language Aid test, and that's for bilinguals and language aids who are working out there directly with the LOT community. And so this test basically tests their LOT, and it's a really good, credential in the sense that it ensures the organizations that employs a bilingual person, that bilingual person can actually has the required oral communication skills to be able to interact with the LOT community. So, there's things like that NAATI can add on, but we're hoping that it'll become a popular test and also a measure for, bilingual people who are working in the community.
That's a great point you make, because we know, for example, the CCL test is a good avenue in that regard as well. But for people who are already Australian residents, the CLA test, I think, should be promoted more. And I think it would really provide extra, I guess, because sometimes people might even get paid a little bit extra for having that credential. But also it would be really, really good for communities to be getting services in their language when they can.
That's right, exactly. It's all about service delivery. It's all about this fact that it's not the LOT speaking person that needs the interpreter or the bilingual worker. It's lawyers and judges who need good services to provide justice. It's doctors who need good language communication to provide healthcare and other services. And it's the same with that as well. So the better the communication, the better the service is going to be.
Absolutely. I like that point you make. I was speaking to a wonderful colleague yesterday as well, and she made the same point, saying when we're talking about interpreter services or language services, we're always talking about the non-English speaker and their needs and requirements, but there is also the English-speaking client as well. That's the lawyer, the doctor, the physiotherapist, the Centrelink worker who needs to do their job properly, to make sure that years of training, being a barrister, doesn't get poured down the drain with bad interpreting, for example, or no interpreting.
No interpreting.
Oh, no interpreting. Exactly. So I thank you for making that point as well. All right. Well, I was trying to wrap it up before, but you did give me some little bit of extra information there. So thank you. Let's talk about NAATI going forward. What is your vision for NAATI going forward as the new chair? I know you already told us about some of the plans, but are there any exciting initiatives, plans for the future that you can share with us?
Well, I'll talk to me in about 6 months.
6 months.
No,
okay.
Look, the board is having a strategic meeting day early next year, because now, as I've said, the certification system's embedded, things have settled down, and so NAATI has actually met most of the strategic points that they set in 22 to 26. So now it's time to see, where do we go from here in the future? And as you know, we've the NAATI has achieved quite a lot, but now it's time to meet again and see the strategic direction that NAATI will take. So obviously, continuing improving the testing system. One of the things that I think the board might be really interested to look at is bridging that gap between training and the test, where improving the pass rates of the NAATI test. And I'm not kind of trying to say what's going to happen, but I think one of the issues that they might be interested in is maybe providing more scholarships for training, for that training people in how to sit for that test and what the test is about and so on, and funding that in some way with scholarships and so on, as well as more testing materials. As you know, the resources on the website now have increased tremendously, those resources for candidates, but there's still obviously room for improvement, and I think that that's one of the directions that certainly I would like to see that they get looked at, and for translation as well. So that continuous improvement on how to both improve that certification rate, how to bridge that gap and improve the rate of pass, so that you give people more opportunity to familiarize themselves with the test. And I mean, the test tests the skills of interpreters, but as we know, when interpreters go into this room and then suddenly get faced with this test, they often tend to freeze and so on. So more preparation there is needed. And as well as looking at, other opportunities that exist for NAATI. So I think it'll be a really exciting day, and I'm really looking forward to that.
Well, maybe I speak to you just after that, and you can update us on everything that you have spoken about. So I'm always looking for excuses to get you back on the show. So there's my excuse. I just came to me as I was just about to let you go. So you're a very accessible person, right? You're an interpreter, you're a translator, you're a teacher, and you still do that. You haven't stopped doing any of that.
No.
A lot of people know you in the industry as consumers or as colleagues. Do people come to you directly and say, well, now that you're the NAATI chair, do this or do that? Are they trying to go straight to the top? Have you had?
Yes, a little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit, yeah. And it's
How do you
good
deal with
because I listen. But it's good because, I mean, having an ear, and that's my skill that I bring to the board, I guess, is that being
Give the
in
generic
touch
email,
with the
the
ground base.
generic phone number, and say call them.
No, I don't get overwhelmed with with inquiries and so on. But it is good that people can talk to you frankly, and that you can talk on the same level because you know the issues. You're not sort of starting from scratch. So yes, I do get a little bit of lobbying. It was a bit novel at the start when I first started on the board, but I'm getting more used to it now. But it's great, I think, that people feel comfortable approaching me and discussing different things. And of course, yeah, you try as much as you can, but it also involves interpreters, So I always say that interpreters and translators and need to also promote things and belong to organizations like OSIT and, try and move things forward and participate in that and not let just the usual volunteers do the work in that sense. So it's a two-way thing often.
Well, congratulations again on your appointment as the chair of NAATI. You are very, very welcome indeed. And we thank you and we wish you good luck and all the best. And we expect a lot from you.
Thank you, Fatih. It's been a pleasure as always. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. And good luck with everything. And hope to chat to you sometime in the early next year for some updates.
Thank you.
If you've stayed all the way through to the end, thank you very much. If you haven't done so already, hit like and subscribe. I was with Magdalena Rowan today, among many other things, the chair of NAATI. Also, just a little reminder as well that the AUSIT National Conference is coming up. It'll be in Melbourne from the 21st to the 23rd of November. There are still spots available, so get onto the website. The program is also available now. You can see the speakers there too. There is a discount for AUSIT members, but there is also a non-member price as well. So ideally, you can become an AUSIT member and get the discount. Great. If not, you can purchase as a non-member as well. There's going to be presentations from all around the different aspects of our industry. From a whole bunch of different amazing presenters, including some international ones as well. We're going to have the extreme pleasure of welcoming Dr. Holly Silvestri from University of Arizona, from the Safe AI Task Force. And she's going to be talking to us about the developments in augmented interpreting or AI in interpreting. So please, if you haven't done so already and you want a whole bunch of PD points, that's pretty much all your PD done for the year, I guess. There's going to be many, many different streams. So come one, come all. I'm in Melbourne. I'll be there. And hopefully I can show you around and tell you where the best coffee is and where the best cocktails are, if you're that way inclined. So hopefully see you there, 21st to the 23rd of November. Thank you very much again for joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing you in the next episode. All the best.
Conversations Podcast.